I will introduce the first, who is Chairman Emmanuel Daimon Luke, who is the director, who is the Chief Executive Officer of DeKalb County government. Just briefly, he has, over his tenure since 1981, he has doubled the number of minorities and women working in county government, and that is upper level, not bottom level. I'm sure you all know we fill the bottom levels already. He has appointed the first black fire chief in DeKalb County's history, first black judge, executive assistant, first female executive assistant. I could go on, but I know he doesn't want me to go too far. He even introduced a resolution in DeKalb County to make Martin Luther King's birthday a county holiday 2 years before it became a federal holiday. And I mention these things because DeKalb County had a very bad reputation. At one point in time, he would get chased out of DeKalb County. Now he is the Chief Executive Officer. How about that? So with no further ado, he doesn't cut corners and he doesn't mess around. He gives it to you straight. So here's Emmanuel Daimon Luke.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm delighted to be here today again with my great friend and the great Honorable Mayor of Atlanta, Andrew Young. I happen to be probably his #1 fan out of his immediate family, outside of his family. And it is a great pleasure to be able to serve in this area with this great man. And he is an inspiration. I want to welcome you to our area. And I'm sure you know about Atlanta. And if you don't know enough about it, please find out more about it, but you need to know about DeKalb County. DeKalb County is a place that Martin Luther King talked about when he talked about Stone Mountain and children playing together. He was talking about DeKalb County. It is the mother county of the area. Fulton County and Atlanta were carved out of it. And I'd have kept the rivers if I'd have had a choice in that, but that was way before my time. But it is a place that has changed, will continue to change. It is open to all sorts of programs that make it better for everybody. Its desire is to be the place where the American experiment works the best. The desire incorporates the idea that we can talk all we want about equality until the money is shared in a better manner. It won't ever be that equal, and we work towards that. It is not easily done. We don't make any special benefits for those who want to participate. We go to the extremes in explaining our programs to the degree that anybody can understand them if they don't, and we encourage people to participate. But I'll be very frank with you, it is not one of those special entities that people can just walk in and say, I want a contract, and get one. You have to compete for it. But recognizing that fact, we have gone beyond the pale in bringing to those who wish to participate the procedures necessary to participate in DeKalb County. I believe in that. I believe in the long term that is how you build a solid foundation. And while we encourage and work hard towards those goals that we have set, it is done in that manner, and I won't mislead you about that. With that in mind, we are making our goal, and we hope to exceed it. I always intend to exceed it, and I want that to be the criteria of what we do in DeKalb County. Enough of that. I'm glad you came to Atlanta and Georgia. I want you to come back, and you ought to move to DeKalb County when you come back here, because it costs less to live in DeKalb County. It's better place, really. But if you do come to Atlanta, go to my bar. Thank you again for letting me be here. I want to tell any of you who have any questions about us, please, I know this is a business conference, call the county if you need any assistance in how to do business with DeKalb County or any facet of it. And for those of you who have your pens, it's 371-2881. This is Michael Cooper. He's my affirmative action officer. Evan Sanders is sitting in the audience. He's our purchasing agent representative. And there are many others. But if you ever have a problem, you can't get them, call me. I'm very accessible. But I do want you to do business with DeKalb County. And please, when you move here, as you will, nobody ever comes to Atlanta that leaves it. Come here and move to DeKalb County, and I'll be glad to show you how to get there. Thank you very much. Oh, hey, I got another privilege. I get to introduce this fine fellow sitting next to me, and you can't say anything that most of you don't know. But Andy Young is a symbol of what's right in this world. Andy Young is a chief proponent of human rights, of doing things that are right, of peace, of careful understanding of what the world should be. He goes anywhere in this world and they know him. When I talk to people that come into my office from all over the world, they can talk about Andy Young. Atlanta is the luckiest place in the world to have a mayor like Andy Young. I bring to you Andy Young.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. After Emmanuel said all those good things about me, I can't fuss with him too much about what he said about DeKalb County. But we are really glad to have you with us on this occasion, and glad to take this opportunity to share with you why we feel that minority and female business participation is the cornerstone of the success and growth of our city. We also want to try to help you to understand why we feel that the success and future of our nation and any other nation depends on how well we are able to share the rewards and blessings of the society with all of our citizens. Now, the irony of this whole controversy has nothing much to do with affirmative action. The problem is, what kind of worldview do you have? If you get your worldview straight, you don't have any trouble with affirmative action. And people who have trouble with affirmative action, I think, have a distorted and inaccurate worldview. Essentially, those who have trouble with affirmative action, though they consider themselves conservatives and speaking to us from the right wing, the fallacy in their position is that they actually have a Marxist worldview. The Marxist worldview is that the world is one pie, and you slice that pie one way or the other. And for somebody to get a piece of the pie, somebody else has to lose a piece of the pie. For somebody to get a bigger piece of the pie, somebody else has to give up a share of the pie. Atlanta doesn't operate on a Marxist worldview. Atlanta operates on a capitalist worldview. And in a capitalist worldview, if there is a pie and you bring somebody else to share in that pie, you're not taking something away from anybody else. You're making that pie grow bigger. And I would contend that the story of Atlanta's success is in our celebration of the understanding that the growth and development which we enjoy is directly related to the fact that we learn to share, that we learn to let new people into the economy, that we learn that the more who participate, the bigger the pie, and the bigger is everybody's share. Now, that was a decision that was made actually before we had a black mayor. And though there's no doubt that Maynard Holbrook Jackson was responsible for institutionalizing the whole concept of minority business participation, the truth of it is the first decision was probably made under the administration of Sam Massell, and was made around the construction of our mass transit system. And it was a decision that not only included blacks and women, it was a decision that was sophisticated enough to realize that the poorest of the poor needed to be considered in any successful economic equation. I like to point to that because that's where Atlanta's success started. Atlanta's success started when we decided we were going to lower the bus fare from 50 cents to 15 cents to compensate poor people for the regressiveness of sales tax. Atlanta's success began when that decision also included a commitment that 20% of the contracts that went to building that mass transit system would go to minority contractors, and that 30% of the employment would go to minority employees. That social equation was the agreement between the poor and the rich, between black and white, between male and female, which institutionalized the slogan which this city has made famous and which has made this city famous, and that is a city too busy to hate. When we institutionalized that concept in a program of affirmative action, we became a city busy making money, and we've been busy making money ever since. When Maynard Jackson moved it one step further and insisted on joint ventures in the construction of our airport, it held up the airport for a little while, but when we finally built the airport, we built what is now the world's busiest and best airport, and we built it on time and under budget, with minorities and female contractors all contributing. There's one young woman who came up to me and said that one time when she heard me say this, and said, "That wouldn't have been true if it hadn't been for me." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "The airport was scheduled to open, and every major contractor in town was tied up on some part of that airport, the runways or the building or the electricity, and said nobody had really worked on the parking lots." And this is a young white woman who's a Georgia Tech graduate engineer, and she said, "I went to them and I said I could get the parking lots done. And the only reason they gave them to me was that everybody else was busy." And she said, "I took the remaining parking lots that had not been contracted, and I started after the traditional majority contractors had started in another area and said, I got my part of the parking lot through ahead of them, and I was under them in costs. And she said she has always been grateful for the notion that she had a chance as a young woman engineer to get a major contract like that that enabled her to escalate into a new stage of economic development. Now, if we'd been fighting over the Atlanta pie in 1971, we wouldn't have had a lot to fight over. This was the biggest hotel in Atlanta then. And then all of a sudden, we began to work together. We created an image of cooperation, an image of stability, an image of order, an image of dialogue and communication. And when people began to look around for where they would sink their money, where it might be secure for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and they saw turmoil and doubt, they saw confusion and conflict in most of the cities of America. They saw cities that had no conflict, but were essentially maintaining stability and order by an exaggerated system of police oppression. And they knew that it was only a matter of time before those cities began to explode, and since they have, and Atlanta began to look better and better. The combination of that airport, that mass transit system, with our expressways and rail connections, all put together with the icing on the cake. And that icing is the affirmative action program and the climate of good race relations. We had this boom in the 70s, right after MARTA, but then all of a sudden the real estate investment trust problems and other difficulties that hit the banking system had kind of cooled off Atlanta. And they were sure that Atlanta was on the way down and that the problems that were beginning to affect Houston and Denver and some other places were going to come here for us. And they didn't want another black mayor. And they didn't want to keep this affirmative action movement going, because they thought that the affirmative action was what was driving investment away. It turned out that just the opposite was true. That affirmative action, a fair system of affirmative action, an equitable and just social and economic order, has been a major attraction for business. And people who could build and invest anywhere, and who know the nation well and who know the world well, consider all things and decide that Atlanta may be the best place in America from which to do business. 602 executives and senior VPs in charge of plant relocation responded to a recent study. And because of that kind of image that we enjoy, the first year they started counting after I became mayor, we attracted $7 billion worth of new investment. The next year it was $10 billion. The year after that it was $12 billion. Then it slacked off to 10. And now this year we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood, somewhere between $7 and $10 billion worth of new investment. And we don't know where it's going to stop. In fact, my contention is that it's not going to stop. My contention is that we're just beginning. And Emmanuel Luke was saying to me just as we talked over lunch that he's convinced that we're on the verge of a boom downtown, that the connection of MARTA, that mass transit line to the airport, and the $140 million that we're putting into underground Atlanta and the fact that we've created a housing enterprise zone downtown is going to bring an influx of capital into the inner city that's greater than any we've ever anticipated before. In fact, I got a call just the early part of the week that a corporation who has assembled a large plot of land in downtown Atlanta wants to come in and talk to me to discuss with me their plan for putting approximately $1 billion of new construction around one of our downtown MARTA stations. I contend that that's the image of an economy that's growing. The pie is growing so much bigger, so much faster, that our problem now is almost the other way around. We've got to find a way to build new entrepreneurs. We've got to find a way to educate more young people to take these high-tech jobs. We've got to train people faster and in greater numbers to keep pace with the growth. That we have created such a growing and booming economy as a result of a democratically just capitalist system. That the strain now on the system is not the money coming in, not the ability of the physical infrastructure to absorb that money, but the strain on our city is the ability of the human element to respond, to fill those jobs, to keep that business attitude going. The challenge to the leadership to think big enough and broad enough to develop a world vision which can take in stride the fact that a foreign company is going to sink $1 billion in your city and go on and see what that means to the long-range future of the entire region in which we live. I give our whole climate of race relations, and particularly the program of affirmative action, credit for this kind of boom. Now let me tell you why. If we had not given over $150 million in contracts to almost 400 different certified minority businesses, if our Department of Contract Compliance had not worked with an IBM and a Bell South and a Rio and an Underground Atlanta and a Southside Industrial Park involving minorities in an additional hundreds of millions in jobs and contracts, we would not have a 4.5% unemployment rate. In fact, black unemployment is not even 7% in our city. It's somewhere between 6.5 and 7. And our problem already is that the Private Industry Council can come up with more jobs in a summer quite often than we can come up with people to fill those jobs. We have a situation where McDonald's and Burger King are paying $5.50 an hour and can't get people to work. We have an economy that's booming so fast because when we give a minority contractor a contract, something marvelous and wonderful happens in our city. I got Rodney Strong and his staff to track down one contract for me. It was a contract on the 4th runway at the airport. And we had, in that one contract, 95 men, 95 black men who were on a job making good money for 18 months. That means 95 families that can afford to keep their children well-dressed and in school. It means 95 families that can talk to their children about college, whose wives can go confidently to a boutique, a beauty parlor, who are members of churches, who are involved in regular health care checkups, who essentially become a part of the American way of life because they have a job, and a good job, and a well-paying job. Were it not for those well-paying jobs, were it not for those good jobs, this city, which is now somewhere around 65% black, would be indeed in a significant amount of turmoil. We would either be a police state or we'd be a battleground like Northern Ireland or Southern Lebanon. And the thing that makes us different, the thing that makes us one of the fastest growing economies in the world, is that we have worked out a mechanism for sharing, a mechanism for bringing new people in to get a piece of the pie, confident that pie is going to grow bigger as a result of new people sharing in capital and generating new wealth and attracting new business to what is a thriving and successful economic environment. What the city does is minimal, but we do 36% this year, or last year, of all of our contracts with minority contractors. We did 34.6% last year. On most big contracts, we do somewhere around 50-50. And where we have problems is in the little bitty contracts, the office supply contracts. It's not so much the contracts, but in the purchasing, because we don't have a sufficient base of minority business to even get in and compete for the money that's there. But we have just begun a new venture capital network to make it possible for new businesses, minority and female entrepreneurs, to begin to start new businesses and share in this growth and development with us. And all of this is going to continue to contribute to the pie that we are enjoying so much, getting bigger and bigger. I don't have figures that can document this on a local level, but there are 2 or 3 figures that will explain this on a national level. One is that when Martin Luther King Jr. wrote Stride Toward Freedom in 1958, the total earning power of black America was $17 billion annually. Last year, the total earning power of black America was $203 billion annually. But in the midst of that tremendous growth, the earning gap between blacks and whites continued to widen. Blacks going from 17 billion to 203 billion didn't make whites poorer. It made white folk richer. And it made white folk richer because they were already in the pie, in the system. And what happened also with black males coming in was that white women also came in. And so we have had an uneven entry into the economy. Yes, blacks have come in. Blacks have come in at a rate better than white women. But the fact that white women have come in and added their incomes to the income and the family of mostly white men means that whites have grown faster than blacks. But to prove that there is a certain justice in the system, that if you take middle-class blacks and middle-class whites who are married and with similar economic background, they essentially are now achieving economically on parity. That is, if you've got the same education, been married the same length of time, you have the same earning capacity. That leads us to another problem, which is a side issue of mine as a preacher, and that is one of the problems we have to deal with is keeping us folk married, whether they be black or white. Divorce has become a problem for the economy. that you just can't keep two households for the same price that you can keep one. And when you start getting to the place where you're making a little money and in a position to expand and develop a new business, if you don't treat your wife or your husband right and get put out and you have to divide up the income, you're starting over again. And so divorce is foolish amongst other things. But you come to church. Come to church on Sunday and you hear the rest of that sermon. But this does not mean we have not had problems. Every time we make a decision and award a contract to one contractor, there's 6 other that go around knocking the program. Even though they might have gotten the last 2 contracts, they're going to knock this and say there was something unfair about the very time that they got it. The process of certification is one of the most rigorous and diligent processes we've had. And we've had people playing all kinds of games. We've had black folk coming, pretending to be significant corporations and only being shams and thinking that they're going to get by because they're friends of mine or friends of somebody's. We can't play that. We have to certify. We go out and count. We've had contractors that we fight like I don't know what to give contracts to that come back and say they can't find any minority subcontractors qualified. We say, the hell you can't. If you're going to keep this contract, you're going to find some minority subs and work with them just like we had to work with you 3 years ago. And then when the minority subs get on, they will come and tell us when we go out and check with them and find that they haven't hired anybody but white folk. We say, wait a minute, you got this contract as a minority contractor. You really need to maintain at least 25% minority employment, just like we require the white contractors. Well, but them niggas don't want to work. That's why we got Rodney Strong heading up our contract compliance program. Because whenever they say they don't want to work, we send somebody big and ugly like Rodney out to straighten them out. But though I have described what I feel to be the reason for our growth and success, I have also been describing the most controversial program in the city of Atlanta. Because anytime we give any contract, whether it be to somebody black or white, we always have 5 or 6 that did not get the contract. And we always have on the city council somebody's friend who was one of those who didn't get the contract. And it's very easy to call for an investigation. And all you have to do in politics is to attack somebody else, and you get your name in the paper, and nobody ever goes back to check whether the attack was worthwhile or in any way just. And so this has been a very controversial program. But it means that in this kind of controversial program, you've got to keep it like Caesar's wife. You cannot stray not one little bit. There cannot be any kind of suggestion of favoritism. You have to be able to document and justify every decision you make. And it's not only that people are going to challenge your judgment. On every decision, they're going to challenge your motives. And it's very, very hard to defend one's motives. But they're going to even go further than that. They're going to challenge your judgment. They're going to challenge your motives. And ultimately, they're going to challenge your intelligence. Because basically, they don't believe that any of you or me has been smart enough to figure out how to keep a city working as well as this is working. We have generated more jobs in this metropolitan area and attracted more investment than the entire European community over the last 5 years. I mean, all of Europe put together has not grown like the metro Atlanta area. And a lot of the business that we're getting is coming from other places. But nobody would ever think that I had anything to do with that or that I know what I'm doing. When I've been traveling from place to place, I'm always up to something that's no good. And when we begin to be involved in attracting new business and go into the long-term and patient negotiations and trying to find where they located, there are 12 council members that figure if it doesn't go in my district, and it can't go in but one, the other 11 are upset that we're neglecting them in some way. And so I say to you, you have to be sure that you maintain the integrity of this program wherever you are, because it really is what America is all about. If America cannot share the wealth through a democratic, free enterprise system, it's going to have conflict and controversy, and that's going to lead to violence and destruction. And if America cannot see our cities and our counties and our states generate new economic activity, we're going to be plagued by problems of unemployment and welfare, and ultimately prisons to try to promote the kind of stability. It costs you about $22,000 to $30,000 a year to keep a young man in prison or a young woman. You can send him to college for somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000. You can find him a job and train him for somewhere around $2,000 to $4,000. It just seems to me that good government and good business is training people for jobs and turning them into taxpayers rather than tax liabilities. And that's the task that you're entrusted with. There's nobody else in government trying to do that. There are very few people in the business world or in government that understand that. You will be seen as an intrusion and an interference because people will want to do things their way and not consider some of these qualifications and principles that you're going to be talking about. But if you don't succeed in helping everybody to share a piece of this wonderful American apple pie, then folk are going to mess up the pie, trying to fight over the little bit that continues to diminish. And I don't think any of us want that. When Emmanuel was introduced, it was said that there was a time when he couldn't go to DeKalb County. First time I came through Atlanta, I was scared to death because Georgia wasn't a place for a black man to be alone at night. And I could not have conceived that I would be the mayor of this city or that I would be a part of any economic experiment that's been this successful and wonderful. We've come too far from where we started from, and nobody ever told us that the way would be easy. But I don't believe he brought us this far to leave us.